Could be many, many planets. A long time ago, Nancy Leader talked with us about Planet X, and she'll be back in a moment. She hasn't been with me for about 5 years, so I'm looking forward to chatting with her. Nancy Leader, Zeta Talk, next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Now, those of you who have listened to our program for years, you know the name Nancy Leader. Those of you who are brand new, well, you might not. Nancy Leader is a lifelong contactee, communicates with the Zetas. She left a career in California, went to her family farm in Wisconsin to be an example of how people should prepare for the upcoming Earth changes as predicted by the Zetas, whom she channels, by the way. Plate movements, volcanoes, tsunamis, and boy, have we had a few of those, which she believes are caused by Planet X. Welcome back, Nancy Leader. This is quite a night, Nancy. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, George, I'm so primed. I've got so many. I worked up a talking points page, and it includes the increased visibility of Nibiru/Planet X, because, of course, it goes by many names. The Earth wobble, the daily Earth wobble, and how it's becoming worse and more immeasurable. Electromagnetic pulse and methane light towers. Electromagnetic pulse, such as what happened at Hoboken recently. After-time land grabs, and why Facebook had a smackdown over their attempt to get over Africa and dominate it. The multi-pronged approach to admitting that Nibiru is in our inner solar system, and conscious contact is on the increase.
And we've got that link for you that you sent us. It's already set up at coasttocoastam.com.
Yes, it is. I highly recommend, because I got all these photos and images. Right. Where do you want to start?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you and thank you. And let me tell you why. I first interviewed you when I came in to host Coast to Coast full-time 2003. And we channeled the Zetas. Do you still do that, by the way?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
We can do that tonight.
We'll do that tonight.
Yeah, it's really a telepathic contact. They put some of their DNA in my brain in the telepathy center so that I get their concepts. I don't hear a voice. I get their concepts, and I wrap English around it.
All right. Well, you were one of the first then, and even a little further back, to talk about Nibiru, this other planet. Of course, Zechariah Sitchin did that, but you were the one who was very specific, and others started following your lead. And you took a lot of heat for this, Nancy, over the years, from people saying, well, where is it? It's not here. Now astronomers are beginning to say that there's something in our solar system, folks. There's something out there. They're finding other planets in our solar system, but I think they're beginning to realize now that the big one really is there. And I just wanted you to know that for, everything you took over the years, you ought to be commended for sticking to it because you've been vindicated as far as I'm concerned.
It helps when you know you're right. And so, yes, indeed, and it gets better than that. Planet 9, it's all started in January, latter part of January, with Planet 9. Oh, out there past Orion, there's some sort of a tug thing. Well, guess where the aphelion of Planet 9 is? Right at the lower part of Orion's bow. If you look at the path diagram, which, by the way, is on that Talking Points page, go link to it, folks, that's exactly where the Zetas said that in 1983, the infrared team found an object out there, and they said, oh, we don't know if it's inbound or not, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, identical, right? So that's how accurate the Zetas are. They put the path up where people should look, and we did. We had teams going out, 2001, 2, 3, and they found it, on the, they took the star charts, they did CCD images, they did infrared, they went to observatories, and they tracked it according to the Zeta's coordinates. This was, in 2001 to 2003, and then in the spring of 2003. It was close enough that people took photos of it coming inbound, crossed the Earth's orbit, and went closer to the sun, preparing to pass the sun, and at that point got lost in the glare, and things changed, became more difficult to see. People saw brilliant double sunrises and double sunsets on occasion. If they used filters that filtered only for red spectrum light, they could see the complex, but, it was tricky. You have to take the insert from a floppy disk, and they sometimes saw the moon swirls, which are like long tubes. This passing planet, Nibiru, is about 4 times larger than Earth, 23 times as massive, and it has multiple moons, at least 2 dozen, that trail behind it, and they form long tubes because they get in a dance with each other, and that the sunlight ricochets down that tube and comes out like a flashlight pointing toward Earth. And on occasion, people say, oh, bright orbs, around the sun. And even so bright, they would pull over on the highway and try to take pictures. But other than that, it was hard to see because it's so shrouded in red dust.
Right.
Now we have the multi-pronged approach. The first thing that happened is Planet 9. And then in it's coming, and there was... Now, characteristic of this whole year is various astronomers are popping up with stuff. They act like bumbling idiots. Oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Why couldn't we see it before? Well, the Hubble, the WISE, and star chart mapping, except Kepler probes, they're looking way far out, and it was right under our feet.
It was right there.
Then they switched to the Dark Energy Survey, which is infrared, run out of Chile by the ESO, and they see things close in. In 2010, they found several exoplanets closer to the solar system than these other far-out, guys like WISE. Oh, okay, that explains it. Then we had the retrograde issue, because if you look at the Zeta Talk chart issued in 1997, the Nibiru goes into a retrograde orbit as it gets closer in, and they said, well, now we have Niku. Oh, guess what? There's this little rock thing, trans-Neptune, and it's in a retrograde orbit, and it's in the inner solar system. Then they have the business about, the Zetas said, way out there is a dead binary sun of our star, our sun, and that's included because Lund University came up with saying, well, maybe Planet 9 is in this weird orbit because another sun stole it from our solar system. So now we've got the binaries under discussion. It's all coming out. We are poised at this point to say that Nibiru is parked next to the sun, just where the Zeta said it would be, and they're going to find it on the Dark Energy Survey, which they're going over the older charts, saying, wait a minute, there's an exoplanet, 2003, right next to the sun. And we're ready for that, and it could happen today.
Why the shroud of secrecy, Nancy? Why does that continue?
Well, Reagan, according to the Zetas, Reagan in way back when, time of 1981, in 1983 actually, they said, issued some executive orders saying, we've discovered, that Nibiru really exists and it's close enough that it's inbound, right? Don't anybody talk about that. People will panic. They'll stop paying their mortgage. They'll move away from the coastline. The houses will be thrown back on the banks. There'll be chaos and rioting and insanity. They can't handle it. We can handle the truth, but they can't, right? So he issued this executive order saying it's hush-hush, and plenty of astronomers lost their lives trying to get the truth out, including Harrington, he was a naval astronomer. He went to New Zealand. He said, I'm going to look for it, I'm going to tell the public, and boop, he was dead. So, and in addition, Reagan wrote an executive order, don't talk about the alien presence. Don't tell people. They can't handle it. We can handle it, but they can't. Well, now there's so many contactees. According to the Zetas, over half of mankind has given the call and is chatting with aliens, and they know the truth. Down deep in their subconscious, they know the truth. So what the aliens have done is, rather than force an admission, they've gone bottom up and talked directly to the people. Now, Obama wanted to tell people in 2012, we went through this, so many assassination attempts, that he wasn't supposed to, he couldn't do an Oval Office thing, he couldn't do an emergency broadcast, they were blocking him right and left. So it didn't work out. And Jade Helm in 2015 was all set up that he could get on and tell the people, Nibiru exists, it's there, we're going to have a passage, okay, this is what might happen, we'll let you know, and he chickened out. We got all the way to September of 2015. Jade Helm ended, and Dunford got disgusted and took over. And we are in a silent military coup. That's my understanding.
Nancy, to the new folks who do not know what Nibiru is, would you tell them what this is?
Yeah, it's a planet that has a very odd orbit. It actually goes past both suns, where most planets, as you're aware, go around and around and around. They find a spot and they don't crash into each other. But this one, from coming out of the Big Bang, and when planets and suns and everything were just formulating, for whatever reason, it got into a sling orbit, and it goes like train tracks, the Zetas have described it. Not exactly an oval, but more like train tracks. Chuck, 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 and goes around the dead dark star, and then chuck, 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 comes back around our star, our sun, and back and forth. For us, we get a visit from this guy every 3,600 years on average. The last time was the Jewish Exodus, when and Moses and the staff down to the river, and it turned blood red.
Parting the Red Sea and everything else.
Yeah. And that was the last one. The flood was 3 back, 10,800 years or so. And it's written in the geology of the Earth that we have this crustal shifts. Hapgood wrote a book about that, and he said it's really that the crust breaks loose from the core, and on this slippery layer just under the floating earth plates, they slide, and that accounts for ice ages, wandering poles, blah blah blah, and it does. So Einstein, who was a buddy with Hapgood, said, "Oh, this is the best explanation I've read." Right? So Nibiru is not exactly a planet and not exactly a brown dwarf. It's a weird hybrid that I'm told by astronomers they have no term to describe. The Zetas call it a smoldering brown dwarf. It's very massive, and it has more water than our planet, less land, more water, and deep open rifts that show light and heat coming out because it's got a burning process going on, but not like a sun, not hot like a sun. So it can be out there in space and have its own heat and light. And also, it's the home planet of the Anunnaki, who were transplants put on that planet because it's habitable. And because it has a greater gravity draw, about 1.6 times greater than Earth, they are about 50% more big. They're 8 foot tall, they're muscular, big boned, and they were considered in the past, when they were here mining for gold, to be gods. The gods of Mount Olympus.
Like Genesis would point out.
Yeah, like David and Goliath. Goliath was an Anunnaki. The Visigoths of Germany. These were Anunnaki. A lot of history. They had assistance from aliens that would levitate big stones, which is why they could build the Great Pyramids and do all this cities up in the mountains in Peru and heads of Easter Island, and etc. We have a long history with the Anunnaki. They were chased off the earth about 4,000 years ago by the Council of Worlds. And yes, we do have an administrative body in the universe because this is a schoolhouse, Earth is, for very young souls. We're supposed to be able to ponder whether we want to be, generous and caring and practice the golden rule and care about others, or stay selfish like a little baby, a hoard, greedy, demanding. 5% of souls do not evolve. They don't grow up. They stay that way and eventually get hauled off to prison planets. The other 95% grow and become and are allowed to graduate to higher densities or dimensions where they can do things like space travel, and they're more high tech. They have longer lives. They, et cetera, et cetera. So this was a schoolhouse, and the administrative force in our part of the universe, known as the Council of Worlds, the Zetas call it the Council of Worlds, said, all right, the Anunnaki have to go and leave the Earth because they are too intimidating. They treat man like slaves, which we were, mining for gold and ripping hearts out of chests and, whatever horrors. And it's not a balanced environment for mankind to make their spiritual decisions. So they chased the Anunnaki off by having all kinds of accidents. They kept losing their gold. Their ships would encounter big waves and sink, whatever. And they have mined for gold on Mars, Phobos, a moon of Mars, and elsewhere in the solar system. They're presumably sitting out there on Nibiru, closer to the sun than we are, within the orbit of Venus, but they're outbound at the current time.
Nancy, the work of Zecharia Sitchin at this point, would you say he was spot on?
Not about everything. He took whatever he translated literally, and according to the Zetas, the Anunnaki, who by the way they're not gods. They're not a higher level entity, like most of our visitors are. They're peers of mankind. They're like another race of man, and they got to bragging. They bragged that they had genetically engineered man. The Zeta said, "Oh no, they're just bragging," and so therefore, not everything that Sitchin wrote, but mostly correct. The ancient Sumerians knew about Nibiru. They were in contact with the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki knew about our outer planets such as Pluto, and we didn't. Our modern man didn't know until 1930 that Pluto existed. So all of this is taken as evidence that the ancient Sumerians were indeed talking to the Anunnaki. Then you have things like, the figures, the hieroglyphs high up in the Andes, and showing landing strips. This is how spaceships were to be able to land. Ancient maps that show an outline of Antarctica not iced over as it is today. There's so much evidence, that the Anunnaki were here, sometimes took man up in space, for a look-see, and that we do have crustal shifts.
Wow, that's just amazing that it is so close. And the inhabitants of Nibiru, would you call them friendly at this point?
They're just another race of man. They have good guys and bad guys as we do. I think they are considered to be fairly structured. They're not a relaxed, loose society. They have a lot of rules. They're a little more prone that way than mankind. Although there's probably, if you go to North Korea, probably very rule-oriented. And we're not going to encounter them. That's what the Zetas have said. They are not going to be allowed to come back. There's a lot of talk. A lot of people say, oh, the Anunnaki are going to return. That's not true. They won't be allowed. The Council of Worlds is phenomenally powerful. You cannot resist their decisions or their edicts. They have, it's not like the normal police where if you can figure out, whether they're tapping your line or you can get around it.
Hold on for a second, Nancy. We're at the break, but we're coming back for more. Nancy Leader on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to Coast. Nancy Leader with us. Of course, we're talking about Nibiru, and it's there. It's coming. But, Nancy, we were talking about the inhabitants of that planet, and we really shouldn't be concerned about them. Stephen Hawking, the physicist, though, is warning all of us to be very careful about sending out information into space because he's afraid who might capture it and come back. Are you concerned about that?
Oh, heavens, no. We've been visited by aliens for forever. And up until the time of Roswell, approximately, it was conscious contact. The Vedas have people describe, the book from India have people describing what they saw, the weird aliens, and they wwere able to chat, in the Bible where we have angels, floating up, and they seem to have a halo on. According to the Zetas, that was humans being drawn up, teleported up to spaceships. And the reason, what's the halo? Well, nobody washed their hair in those days, and when the sun shines off greasy hair, that's what it looked like. So for a long time, we've been, and all this stuff about sending something out in space, well, they've been capturing that all along, and there are rules about contact. Humans are in control. This is the deal. It's like we're in the playground at school, kindergarten, and they can hover around the outside of the fence and say, "Psst, little boy, come over here," that type of thing. But if a human gives what's called the call, they desire counseling. They want, sometimes it can be curiosity or prayer or the Ouija board or just wondering, and you've given the call. And depending on the nature of your call, if you're really selfish and you wish somebody harm or whatever, the bad guys come down and talk to you, like the little devil on your shoulder. And if you want to help other people, the good guys come down, and the little angel on the other shoulder. And it's psychological and it's counseling. Nothing we do in sending out in space is going to influence anything. And don't listen to Stephen Hawking. I don't think he's ever met an alien, and he's chicken. Just because you have a high IQ does not mean you have backbone.
No, that is absolutely true. Let's talk a little bit about the Earth's wobble, and what's the significance of that?
In 2004, after Nibiru arrived in 2003, it's basically the way it's swinging past the sun. It's not straight up and down like our other planets, Mercury and Earth and the sun, with the North Pole up, South Pole down. It's kind of sideways and pointing its North Pole outbound toward the Earth. Well, when it does that, guess what part of the Earth gets a good shove? Our magnetic and geographic poles do not line up. the magnetic is offset a little bit. South Pole is over there by Tasmania, and the North Pole was up there in the Arctic somewhere, but now it's more like over Siberia. And when it comes around to where the crust side of the North Pole is apparent and vulnerable, it gets a shove from the North Pole of Nibiru. North poles of magnets do not like to touch, as anybody knows. You can't even get them. I don't care how strong you are. You try to get them to snap together. They do not. So we get a shove. And then there's a reverberating. It goes kind of around like a figure eight. If you were way up in space and looked down, you would see a figure eight being formed by the North Pole. It swings over to this way and then that way, and then it bounces back, and then, whoops, time for another shove. This happens daily. It's called a polar push when Nibiru is noon over the Pacific, etc. This is visible. You can see this. I recently got some email from people saying, guess what? I can see Nibiru in a webcam up in Alaska. And I went up there, and it was very puzzling because it's Selawik, which is like near Fairbanks, very clear skies. This is an airplane weather cam showing in all directions, but it was the cam looking north. I said, what? And it was at midnight. Then I realized what was going on. You are not supposed to be able to see the sun at midnight up there. It's supposed to be below the horizon, but because of the tilt of the earth during the wobble, there was the sun rising at midnight and setting again. Then, of course, come morning, it rises again in the east. But this is an example of the wobble. Another example is the Hyperions. This is a French site that whatever it is, that shows coordinates. It's an Earth Orientation Center website, and it shows where the North Pole is pointing out in space. Normally, because we're not exactly aligned, magnetic and geographic, there's a little bit of an offset, kind of a circle. That circle has been getting wider and wider and wider since 2013 till the present. So this is documented proof that we are leaning, to one side or the other. Another one is the jet stream. I have some examples on my Talking Points page, where normally over the North American continent, it swoops down like a V, comes in at Seattle, goes down toward Houston, goes up toward New England, and out. And living in Wisconsin, I used to joke that we get polar weather here because, in fact, that's the way the jet stream was pushing the air. And then it went loop-de-loop. Starting in 2005, etc., it was, vertical in the middle of the continent. It's all over the place. And recently, in 2016, there was a panic a couple months ago, and the news was saying, the jet stream has crossed the equator. We're in trouble. Horrible things are going to happen. They called it a global emergency because, this mapping from the satellites of where the jet stream swirls are was showing it went from the northern hemisphere down below to the southern and back. And they said, what does this mean? It means the wobble is getting worse.
If it gets any worse, then what happens?
You can have, when we go into the last weeks, which the Zetas have said run for 7.3 weeks, and thus the pole shift would never take mankind by surprise. But you can get a lot of flopping around. We currently, you can measure where it is by seeing where the sunrise is and the sunset is, what the time of dawn and sunset is. You can do this, if yourself, and people are doing this, and they say, boy, the sun never rose there before. That is way too far north or way too far south, and that kind of thing. But if you get into a severe wobble, a lot of sloshing in the ocean happens. The severe wobble would be flopping to the left and right and left and right, flopping back away, where the North Pole points away, like almost into 3 days of darkness, but very temporary, and the like. The water doesn't go with the land, and you can get wobble sloshing. Now, during the pole shift, the Zetas have predicted, which is going to be a 90-degree pole crustal shift. In other words, the North Pole will flop over to be where the equator is, and so will the current South Pole, and that far. They predicted 500-foot tides, 600 where there was tidal bore because of high land and the like. But for severe wobbles, they have said 200 and 300 feet. Now that's enough.
Jeez, that's enough to wipe out east and west coasts.
A lot of places. You go around the world to the cities that would be affected. It's not just Miami, New York City, L.A., it's Hong Kong, Sydney, Australia, London, Paris, Buenos Aires. You go everywhere would be affected. So this may happen. We're overdue for this kind of stuff. The administrative force in the universe wanted mankind to be aware of what's coming. They will not stop the pole shift. People say, "Oh, why won't they just stop it?" Well, they don't stop starvation, lightning, tornadoes, pedophilia. They don't stop this stuff now. It's this is our schoolhouse. We're supposed to rise to the occasion and help others. And if you don't have challenges, you don't have spiritual growth. If everybody's beautiful and they are disease-free, they have straight teeth, no genetic illness, diseases, and they're rescued all the time, what do you think you're going to have? A bunch of pampered, you don't have spiritual growth.
Right.
You have to have tribulation so people have opportunity to be heroes, to rise to the occasion or run away. So therefore, they're not going to stop the pole shift. But they have put the brakes on to give Obama a chance to inform the world, because everybody in the world is waiting and saying, well, if we come out and say Nibiru exists, the U.S. is going to say, oh, no. So you have to have Obama say, it's Reagan's executive order, blah, blah, and he didn't get his backbone up last September of 2015, and therefore now we're into the multi-pronged approach with the dark energy survey and all that, and so we are going to learn about it possibly by the end of this year, I would guess. So in the meantime, the brakes were put on to slow down the plate movement, which were described as the 7 of 10 plate movements: sinking of the sun to plate, tipping left into the Pacific of the South American plate, which has been gradually going on, tipping right of the African plate, which has been gradually going on, and the New Madrid adjustment, which we're really ready for and could happen any time. So the brakes have been lifted a little bit, and we may have a severe wobble depending on what the Council of Worlds decides, and I got to tell you, I'm not in the loop on that.
Nancy, you've talked about EMPs, of course. We talk a lot about it on this program, electromagnetic pulse,
Yes.
From an atomic weapon detonated in the atmosphere, or the sun. Is there a concern with Nibiru and the EMPs?
Big time. We've been having EMP bringing down big planes. Air France 447 in 2009 was probably the first of note. MH370 was another. It became, everybody, all the electronics gets walloped. It's a pulse, and it either is a surge or a brownout. Either one destroys electronics. And then it became a ghost ship with everybody lacking oxygen and flew by automatic pilot out into the Indian Ocean. We've had others. German wings flew into the Alps because of that. That time, CERN was also having some problems with their electronics, and they just get. And there was another one that went down in Egypt. It was an MS-84 or something. Anyway, that plane was flying right along the plate border of Africa, African plate, and went down, and you never hear the results unless they want to demonize the pilot. Oh, he was suicidal, or something like that. Well, a lot of electric trains on the East Coast, the most recent, Hoboken. Now, just look at it. When I saw the map of where Hoboken was, it's a terminal where these electric trains come in. They all line up like, 10 of them side by side, and all the wires, because these are electric trains, and they come in, and they have to have. It's not just one set of wires down the track, sitting right on the water of the river. There it is, practically stuck out into the water. Well, you know what they say about electricity and water. Electricity, lightning loves water. They tell you, don't be on a boat out in the pond when it's a lightning storm, because, oops, And they say, don't get in a shower, because the water in the pipes is an attractant, and you may find yourself electrocuted while you're showering. Well, electromagnetic pulse, according to this, it's not visible like the crackling of lightning with light, but it has a similar behavior in that it's an arc that has a path, and it wants to ground, and it's not like disseminated over a wide area. It's a very directed, zoop, now I'm down. So it likes the electronics of planes. It likes, and particularly when you take planes over water, that may have rock stress underneath. It's the edge of a plate, or that something's being. It was MH370. The Sonda plate was being squeezed and pushed down and losing elevation at that time. Well, when you squeeze rock, it's an attractant for electrical passage because the air in the rock gets squeezed out, and all the water in the rock is continuous. So therefore, what the Zetas say is it's an electronic screech in the rock. And this is what drives pets crazy when they hear the screech and they want to leave home. That means your rock under you is under stress. You could have an earthquake, and it also is what causes a static in the radio. If you listen to your AM/FM radio and you hear a lot of static, that's the screech coming from the rock. And watch out because you may have an earthquake.
Nancy, next hour when we take calls with you, tell me how you would want to format this. People want to talk to you. People may want to talk to the Zetas. Can you go in and out, or how do you want to work that?
Yes, we can go in and out, absolutely. They should just specify, and I'll give it to the Zetas. It's different than Nancy Talk, and I will say, okay, this is Zeta Talk, and now they're done, end of Zeta Talk.
And subject matter?
It doesn't matter, anything, wide open. If they don't ask any personal questions if you don't want to know the answer.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Let's talk also about what you call the conscious contact. What is that?
Well, actually, I'm bringing that up because of the little blue alien in Peru, which you featured on Coast to Coast, and it was absolutely charming and undeniable. 4 different videos. And then we had witnesses, all kinds of including police, and they had the little guy was walking, and then he floated when somebody went toward him, and then he went out into traffic on the highway and seemed to be mowed over by a truck and popped out on the other side. In other words, he did dimension shifting to escape the truck. He could float himself up, which aliens can do, not mankind, but when you graduate up there, you can, and showing off all these real alien thingies, So I did a study. I did a newsletter feature on this where I've tracked, and you go back into, okay, they had drawings, or, we had the Skinny Bob video in 2011, 17 seconds of what was supposedly released during Roswell. It looked like a real alien. And then we have photo shots, the guy, the peeping Tom out west. Then we got into photo shoots, increasing shots of little aliens, better and better visibility. Then this is a video. So it's a transition to where we're being accustomed to the idea of just seeing them. And I joke and I say, expect E.T. for dinner. I'm serious. We're going to go there as times get tough and we have all this wobble sloshing and big earthquakes and volcanoes increasing. And, what we're going to find is that we get an offer of help from some weird-looking guys that turn out to be aliens, and they may not be hominoid either. And the Zetas say, when you're under stress like that, you can absorb something really bizarre because you're saying to yourself, my gosh, what else can happen? And you don't think much of it. Where in a normal day-to-day you would. So we are going to become galactic citizens and have conscious contact depending on readiness. In other words, if it's going to make you terribly anxious, they're not going to do that.
All right, Nancy, stay with us. We're going to come back. We'll take phone calls. We'll chat a little bit more. Nancy will channel the Zetas, or you can talk directly to her. And our special guest, Nancy Leader, we're going to take your phone calls for Nancy. And when you do call, you can address the question to her directly or ask her to, of course, get the Zetas, and she'll do that as well. She channels them. So we'll be back in a moment with your calls on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back with Nancy Leader and your phone calls. And again, when you do call, ask the question for either Nancy or the Zetas, and she'll do the channeling if need be. The Zetas themselves, what do they look like, Nancy?
Well, some people would say they look like the Greys. They're very thin arms, legs, clunky feet, big heads, big black eyes, no visible ears, although they have ears. They're more like a hole on either side, tiny little slit of a mouth, 2 little dots for nostrils, and that's what they look like. High cheekbones. I think they're beautiful, actually.
And you find them to be pleasant, don't you?
Oh yeah. I'm working with the good-hearted. 95% of every race is good-hearted. They're in that batch. And and I consider them like family, like good friends. Met them when I was 7 or 8 years old, down in the woods, and been chit-chatting with them ever since. This is part of the hybrid program, meaning I volunteered to give my ova in my teens, and I was a virgin till 19, but was able to produce eggs since the age of 10. So very very active in all of that, and it was basically, can you help us? We're trying to develop a new hybrid race. We need ova. And answered all my questions. We talked about the universe, and, et cetera. So I had always wanted to be a communicator in my past lives, because I have about 1,200 lives. I wanted to, during the time of the pole shift, during this time, I wanted to be a communicator, relay information to mankind, and they said, we'll back you on that. Well, it became Zeta Talk, and it became much more successful than they expected. They had to reorient people from other teams, reorient Zetas from other teams to back me up. So here we are with Zeta Talk. I'm 75 years old and still going strong.
Good for you. Good for you. And you're still in Wisconsin, I guess, right?
Yes, I am. Right.
Oh, that's a great state.
Walking the talk.
Great.
Not on the San Andreas, no.
Are you a Green Bay Packer fan?
Yes. Well, sort of ish. Yeah.
Can the Zetas predict who's going to win things?
If they have a statement called "in the hands of man," if it's something where, because man has free will, and where the free will can twist it this way or that way, they don't want to predict because you can't tell. So if it's like geological changes, if it's an explanation for why something is happening, like what happened in Hoboken, the electromagnetic pulse, etc., they jump right in. But they don't like to. They won't deal with money either. You can't say, well, what's the winning lottery ticket, that type of thing, because they think we should not have money at all. And because their answer,
they might be right there.
You should be on the barter system. What are you doing with stocks and bonds and cash, and get seeds and chickens and goats and learn to garden and move inland from the coast? And so that's the answer you'd get on that.
Nancy, will they step in to bail us out of some problem, or will they let it happen? Case in point, the Fukushima disaster, nobody stopped it. Do they have that ability?
Yes, they do, and they did, in fact, interfere. The Council of Worlds allowed interference because my understanding is it was not a natural plate movement occurrence, that it had to do with, if you read Ben Fulford at all, he goes into all this financial wrangling behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That apparently somebody put a nuke in down under the seas because they were trying to blackmail or force or intimidate Japan into doing thus and so with alliances and what they did with their money and whatever. And so it was a man-made disaster, and they mitigated it, according to my understanding. The Council of Worlds allowed a mitigation. It would have been worse if that had not happened.
All right, let's go to the calls. And again, you can ask Nancy or the Zetas. Let's go to Jay in Florida. Welcome to the show. Hi, Jay.
Good morning, George and Nancy. I'm first, huh?
You are first.
I don't think that's happened before. I didn't expect that. Okay. I kind of had some comments and questions.
All right.
Do you want me to do?
Let's go your comments, and then your question will be for Nancy or the Zetas.
Well, I would prefer Nancy
You got it.
because I've recently discovered, and that I'm trying to live as righteous as I can, and that we're not supposed to, and in the Bible, to not seek out psychics and mediumship.
Okay.
So preferably Nancy, and then if she needs to or wants to consult, then that's up to her.
All right.
Okay.
Very good.
So she was saying earlier, well, no, that's more of a question. Okay. So if the Anunnaki are the original alien race and are also the fallen angels and the oldest original alien race, how or what is to say that everything that has come from them, with all their interbreeding, whatever, at the time when they mated with the women, as talked about in Enoch, so we have proof of that, and the Nephilim, the Terrors, the hybrids, the demigods, etc., that they are not related to Lucifer, Satan, or the devil and evil. And my understanding is where they're going to do this Project Bluebeam fake rapture, where Sananda will be the white Jesus Christ, Eve, who chose to leave Adam and the Creator and join Lucifer, will betray the Virgin Mary, and there will be 8 to 10 others who are all really aliens or demons portraying this. And I believe your recent guest, who I'm so glad you have him because he was a new discovery for me, Jeffrey Doherty,
yes,
he proclaims this, where Jesus is coming to slay you, not save you. And I'm seeing more and more people coming along the lines with this, which people need to know he's not white. He is either Palestinian or Middle East, Persian, Hebrew, Israelite, Black, mixed. And the names I keep seeing the most is Yeshua, or Yeshua, so on. Okay, so going more into the question, she was talking about David and Goliath. I guess she's referring to Goliath, if that was the giant, and I guess that would maybe represent more technically a Nephilim instead of a direct Anunnaki, so it would have been a hybrid or a descendant or offspring. As far as the SOL, or Sons of Light, or Soulwar.ru, their position of that, are they actually Masons or Freemasons that are the Sons of Light versus the Sons of Darkness? And if there's a timeline and maybe more of a geographical location, especially since I'm only about 45 minutes from outside of St. Augustine with Florida, of the timeline of the pole shifts and the tsunamis, and are those directly related or separate, such as people are having these prophecies of asteroids and such?
Okay. There is no timeline for the pole shift, and the reason is, as Jesus said, none shall know the date of my return, and that is because it would be used for harm. That people who knew when the pole shift was going to happen would try to round people up into slave camps, or eliminate by poison certain groups that they didn't want around, steps that they wouldn't normally take, but that they would feel free to do because who's going to stop them after the pole shift? The police won't be there, etc. You can't dial 911. Okay. Everything that you rattled on about the fallen angels and this and that, none of that jibes with what the Zetas are saying. They're saying that the Anunnaki are another race of man, just like us. They have good guys and bad guys. They lean a little bit more toward, rules and regulations and cruelty than we do. But other than that, they're just like another culture. We have various races of man and cultures here on Earth. So they're not going to be allowed to return. So all of that you have rattled on about does not jibe with Zeta Talk, nor will they do a one-on-one confirmation or rejection, and they decline to do that because people come forward and say, well, what about this? And we would have to say, well, that's not true, and this is partially true, and this is... So they don't do that. They say, unless another source can predict with great accuracy, as Zeta Talk can, they won't address it. In other words, Zeta Talk has predicted when Nibiru would come into the solar system. They've predicted the wobble. They've predicted... I could go on and on. So unless this other source, has that kind of accuracy of prediction, they don't get a comment from the Zetas. So that's my answer.
Nancy, with the Zetas and their forthrightness in telling you, do they bring things forward, or do you have to ask?
Well, it's supposed to be that I ask, but in other Zeta Talk has been written based on answers of questions posed to them. And it's somebody counted the pages and said you got 40,000 pages there, but by my count, it's more like 10,000 that are representing Zeta Talk. But that's 20 years, and we're prolific, so we just keep churning it out. So it's technically the answer to the call. Aliens cannot counsel humans unless the human requests. So therefore, someone asking a question is giving the call, and otherwise they can't intrude. In other words, they can't. People are not chosen to be contactee or chosen for roles or whatever. They volunteer. The human is always in control.
Always?
Yep.
No deviation there.
Nope.
All right, good.
And although there's a lot of disinfo about, and they dragged him away and thus and so, that's complete BS.
Next up, let's go to Michelle in Green Bay, Wisconsin, your neck of the woods. Hi, Michelle, go ahead.
Hello, my question is for the Zetas.
For the Zetas it is, okay?
About 5 years ago, I had almost died, and I was surrounded by beings before I was going to pass. Could you tell me who they were?
Okay. Here's Zeta Talk. These were spirits representing humans that you knew during your lifetime, that either living or already dead, who were greeting you. They were there to escort you into your next incarnation. This is well detailed within Zeta Talk about between lives, what happens, and it was normal for people to experience this. We presume this was a pleasant experience for you, and perhaps you even vaguely recognize some of the entities. They would may not particularly look like the people that you knew or remembered. They could be just a sense of a presence more than that, but they could possibly have something about them, the aura, that reminded you of this or that person. So that's who you encountered. End of Zeta Talk.
All right, good. Michelle, thank you. I hope that helps you indeed. With Nibiru, will it be amateur astronomers, Nancy, that really bust this loose for us?
Oh, good question. And here, actually, it's a team of astronomers. At first, it started out just to be Planet 9 was a couple of guys in the U.S., Brown, it was over there in Caltech, and this other guy, Whitmere in Louisiana, retired guy. And then we got a bunch of Europeans. We got Lund University and somebody in Spain and the ESO running their observatory in Chile. And then we had a whole other swath that included people in Hawaii, or down in the Tucson Popescope area, all in Cambridge, and they were all over. I said, everybody in the pool, so it could be. It could be, but unlikely, because what they're doing now is tracking the dark energy survey, which is infrared, and I expect, because the Zetas have said, when this is all done, it's going to be known that it arrived in 2003, like the Zetas said, and they can track it to where it is now next to the sun, and that Zeta Talk was right all along. So that what they'll do is they'll find an exoplanet, and they'll say, oh, and it seems to be in a retrograde orbit, which we're already gotten used to because of Nibiru, which is retrograde and recently discovered. And they'll say a little thingy, out there near Neptune, and they'll say, oh, because they can track the orbit, and they say, well, here we are, and truck over to the sun, and so therefore it's going to be the dark energy survey people that are looking at these past images, years worth of images, and so that's not available to amateurs. So to start, but I think they're going to say, wait a minute, aren't all these amateurs seeing something next to the sun? And so there would be a real potential for a role there, yes.
If an asteroid were headed toward the planet, would the Zetas divert it?
Yes. Or the Council of Worlds with. Now, mind you, we're used to thinking of aliens as being hominoid because many of the aliens that we're presented with, and even in Star Wars, they're all Star Trek and Star Wars, they're mostly hominoid. That's the exception. Like less than 10% of all intelligent species are hominoid. They come really weird. And so therefore, we have this huge, the Earth is in a transformative period, and we have so many aliens, disembodied aliens too, that are higher dimensional here assisting, because so many people give the call, and there's so much turmoil going on, and and it's the spiritual. It's kind of like the final exam for so many souls on Earth. So there's a lot of teachers and teachers' aides in attendance. So. Yes, the Zetas have said that the Earth, the Council of Worlds has plans for the Earth. This is going to be a home for the good-hearted in the future. What Jesus said, the meek will inherit the Earth, et cetera, et cetera. It'll take about 100 years for everybody who's currently incarnated as a human to, die and move to either shift off to a prison planet or stay and reincarnate into one of the hybrids, Zeta-human hybrids. But the majority of souls on Earth are going to be taken away to a water planet and incarnate into an intelligent octopus. So this takes about 100 years to achieve this, because we all get to live out our lifetimes. Meanwhile, anything that would be coming toward us we're not talking about bolides and fireballs and meteors that just are showy. We're talking about a big thunk that would really, an extinction level event. It's not going to be allowed.
Nancy's website, zetatalk.com, linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com. Are you doing Facebook or anything like that, Nance?
I have a Facebook, but I do it, but I'm not, and I have a Twitter, but I don't attend it. I do a newsletter every week. I take questions, and address them to the Zetas every week. That's in Zeta Talk Development. And I do interviews, etc., and answer email, and that fills all my time. And I'll have to, when things get really lively around here, I'll have to cut back on that, too, and limit it. So No, I'm sorry, but you can. I have a Gmail where I take questions, and you can find that readily enough from my website. But be aware, we're very particular about what questions we take.
Okay, we're going to come back in a moment with final questions for Nancy Leader and the Zetas right here on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to our final segment with Nancy Leader, of course, as we talk about the Zetas and things that could affect all of us. What about volcanoes and earthquakes, Nancy? Any of those?
They have been steadily picking up, since even before Nibiru arrived in 2003, because of the roiling. There's so many particle flows, and the Zetas talked about an equilibrium, being upset. So it riled up our core, riled up the magma, and therefore the volcanic. It was, and it's been like. Whoop, the charts and earthquakes too. They don't just. It's not a lineal increase. It's like more like that parabolic exponential kind of an increase. So yeah, and the Zetas have said that during the pole shift, every volcano that's been active in the last 10,000 years can be assumed to go off, be 100 miles away for safety from ash and fireballs burping and the like. So they said that Yellowstone will not become a supervolcano. The reason for that is the baffling of the rock layers, as we've had so much subduction coming in from the Pacific plates, pushing under the Rockies and the Sierras. This causes rock layers, so intersecting, and so that any magma coming up has to like baffle back and forth and back. It's like the mufflers on your car. It reduces the force, so it will just be a normal volcano. Yellowstone will.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. Final segment. If you want to talk to the Zetas, just tell us. We go to Wayne in Chicago on Coast to Coast. Hey, Wayne, go ahead.
Hey, George, thank you for a great show again.
You are very welcome.
It's absolutely fascinating.
She sure
I
is.
want to talk to her, not the Zetas.
Okay.
Quick questions. How exactly did they put their DNA in her? And can she explain this silent military coup? And the last question is, she says that like 95% of the people are going to be taken away to a planet to eventually become like octopus-like, but that contradicts what Christianity says about we will be judged, each human being, and those judged to be good will stay with the Lord and his angels forever. Mm-hmm. So, and we won't be octopuses. So can she kind of like explain that?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it takes more than one lifetime to, and judging goes on through tens of thousands of lifetimes, where generally speaking, it takes about 1,000 lifetimes to come to the decision, do you want to be good-hearted or do you want to remain selfish and controlling and, greedy or whatever. So it's only 5% that get hauled off the prison planets. Our Earth at the current time is about 30%, mature, graduated to good-hearted, and maybe 5% mature, graduated to staying mean and controlling, and they go off to prison planet. So that leaves like what are we talking about? 65% or so that are still trying to sort it all out. They're not ready to graduate. They go to become octopuses, But yes, it would contradict the Bible, not surprising, and the Quran and Buddha and anybody else, but it's the Zeta talk, and they're telling it straight, and take it or leave it. So there was another part of the question.
He's talking about DNA and then a silent military coup.
Yeah. The silent military coup. There was a lot of chatter about the chief of staff, the top guy on the Defense Department, had taken over last December, January, and people were saying credible sources. Now we're talking about, backroom rumors and murmuring, and nothing that hit the press, But it was about the time that Obama went off tangoing in Argentina, and when there was all kinds of stuff going on that it seemed inappropriate. He went dancing, and then there was talk about now Paul Ryan was really in charge. Well, he's a Speaker of the House. The succession goes from the President to the Vice President, Speaker of the House, and I'm not sure where after that, but somebody mentioned to me that when Dunford did this and said, we're taking over, he got a resignation letter from Obama and Biden, which he's holding, and will use if he has to, so that technically, if they've resigned or could resign, then Paul Ryan would be running the government. But and the decision was, this is according to the Zetas, not to make this public. And why? Because of the chaos. You can imagine, if we're under martial law, it's totally different than civil law. Our court systems would be thrown into confusion and chaos. Lawyers would challenge every judge and say, well, throw it all out. We can't proceed because we're under martial law, which should be court-martial only, and it would go on like that. There would be so much. So everybody agreed, my understanding, not to announce it publicly, but just to function that way. So Dunford is running things, and Obama is a figurehead, as is Biden. That's my understanding. I have no solid proof. I just know that there was a lot of rumors, and the Zetas confirmed all that. Now, the other one was, how did they get the DNA into my head? They teleported it. Now, if you watch the Little Blue Alien videos, which are linked to from the Coast to Coast website, you can see that this little guy is out on the highway, and his truck comes right where he was, and you say, well, he's mush underneath the truck, and the truck goes by, and there he is, on the other side of the truck, not having been mowed down. He went into a different dimension. So they did that. They basically held my head in a clamp and pointed, and just teleported that little bit of DNA of theirs into a portion of my head. As I recall that, they asked me lots of questions. Do you feel nauseous? Do you have a headache? Can you, all this stuff. Do you feel like throwing up? And to make sure that they hadn't, that they got it in the right place, not in the wrong place. And after that, because I was still not aware of my contactee status, I was aware that I was more telepathic with humans. I would know who was calling before the phone would ring, and I would play games. I would say to total strangers at bus stops, think of something, and don't tell me what you're thinking of, and let me try to guess. And it would take me about a minute, and I was at least 50% accurate, and I would play in games like that. So I had no idea why, but later, when I was doing recall and became aware of my contactee status, the whole story of this thing with the DNA came out, and then I understood.
Let us go next on our wild card line to Charles in Los Angeles. Charles, you're up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning to you.
This is for Zeta, and I'll be quick.
Okay.
Yes. Many have said that the Sasquatch have the capability of going in and out of our dimension. Number one, is that true? If so, could you tell us what civilization they actually stem from? And do you think the spiritual changes are happening pretty quick?
Okay, here's the Zetas. Bigfoot is not interdimensional. Bigfoot is more an early version of mankind. When we genetically engineered, when mankind was genetically engineered from the ape, etc., then this is one of the stages. So it's semi-human, you might say. It is incarnated by souls that are transplants from another world that wanted a time, an R&R, you might call it, a rest and relaxation, a time to contemplate and get closer to nature. They had run amok, and they wanted, a long vacation where they could be primitive and close to nature. So there are souls. They are incarnated, as is mankind, and they are protected from being harmed by man by a type of quarantine. This is why you don't find Bigfoot bodies, we don't have captures and the like, because they are protected, cloaked, so that men just don't see them when they're out there hunting with guns or whatever. There have been occasions when Bigfoot mated with humans. There have been Bigfoot hybrids. These are of record. Nancy has that in a newsletter at one point, documented cases. And they're not that dissimilar from mankind. So they are not interdimensional. They graduate in their own time frame, where mankind is graduating over the next 100 years to either be cycle around to become hybrids if they're good-hearted, or be taken away to prison planets if they're not, or to be taken away to be octopi. Bigfoot has their own time frame, and they are in general older souls than mankind. This is the end of Zeta Talk.
Okay, next up, let's go to Isabella in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hi, Isabella. Go ahead.
My first question is for Nancy.
Okay.
Would the Zetas be able to tell me how someone or something had passed away?
It's for you, Nancy.
Yes, and I'm presuming that she's asking if one of her relatives has passed away, or somebody that she knows has passed away. And here's Zeta Talk. We there's a process. This is Zeta Talk. There's a process when the human body dies. Often before they die, when they're very, very ill, perhaps in a coma in the hospital, the soul leaves. Just as the soul doesn't necessarily jump into a newborn babe for the first few months because the babe is just sleeping all the time. But it hovers around the vicinity. Souls often hover around after death too, chatting with those that they are leaving, and so therefore it's not a clean division. But soul-to-soul conversations are much more common than people realize. They feel that they have communicated with Aunt so-and-so who's perhaps on another part of the world. This is not improbable. If two souls wish to speak to each other, they can touch, find each other, communicate, and then these souls update the brain of that body that's incarnated. So it's very common. We can interrogate souls more deliberately than humans can. In your case, you're reaching out for those you've had experience with or know. In our case, we can tap the database of souls, so to speak, and find the souls, and actually talk to them about their past lives also. End of Zeta Talk. I hope that's what you wanted to hear.
Did that help you, Isabella?
Well, see, what had happened was I had a puppy who had passed away. And I believe that our neighbors had poisoned her, and I was trying to get a little bit of closure to find out if that's what happened or if she was just sick.
And that was for the Zetas, that one.
So you want to know if the puppy was poisoned?
Yes.
And this is Zeta Talk. Yes, you are correct in your assumption. But how you want to proceed? We would recommend when you get a replacement puppy, watch it more closely. And this is the end of Zeta Talk.
Wow, sad story indeed. Okay, let's go to our first-time caller, Mondro, truck driving in Nevada.
Hello.
Hi, Mondro.
How are you today, George?
Good, sir.
Awesome. Hello. My question is for the Zetas.
All right.
And I have a couple of them. And it's in regards to this crossing of our solar systems and the energy that's put out.
System. But now they're beginning to say there could be many, many planets. A long time ago, Nancy Leader talked with us about Planet X. And she'll be back in a moment. She hasn't been with me for about 5 years, so I'm looking forward to chatting with her. Nancy Leader, Zeta Talk, next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Now, those of you who have listened to our program for years, you know the name Nancy Leader. Those of you who are brand new, well, you might not. Nancy Leader is a lifelong contactee, communicates with the Zetas. She left a career in California, went to her family farm in Wisconsin to be an example of how people should prepare for the upcoming Earth changes as predicted by the Zetas, whom she channels, by the way, plate movements, volcanoes, tsunamis, and boy, have we had a few of those, which she believes are caused by Planet X. Welcome back, Nancy Leader. This is quite a night, Nancy. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, George, I'm so primed. I've got so many. I worked up a talking points page, and it includes the increased visibility of Nibiru/Planet X, because, of course, it goes by many names. The Earth wobble, the daily Earth wobble, and how it's becoming worse and more immeasurable. Electromagnetic pulse and methane light towers. Electromagnetic pulse, such as what happened at Hoboken recently. After-time land grabs and why Facebook had a smackdown over their attempt to get over Africa and dominate it. the multi-pronged approach to admitting that Nibiru is in our inner solar system, and conscious contact is on the increase.
And we've got that link for you that you sent us. It's already set up at coasttocoastam.com.
Yes, it is. I highly recommend, because I got all these photos and images. Right. Where do you want to start?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you and thank you. And let me tell you why. I first interviewed you when I came in to host Coast to Coast full-time 2003. And we channeled the Zetas. Do you still do that, by the way?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
We're going to do that tonight.
We'll do that tonight.
Yeah, it's really a telepathic contact. They put some of their DNA in my brain in the telepathy center so that I get their concepts. I don't hear a voice. I get their concepts, and I wrap English around it.
All right. Well, you were one of the first then, and even a little further back, to talk about Nibiru, this other planet. Of course, Zechariah Sitchin did that, but you were the one who was very specific, and others started following your lead. And you took a lot of heat for this, Nancy, over the years, from people saying, well, where is it? It's not here. Now, astronomers are beginning to say that there's something in our solar system, folks. There's something out there. They're finding other planets in our solar system, but I think they're beginning to realize now that the big one really is there. And I just wanted you to know that for, everything you took over the years, you ought to be commended for sticking to it because you've been vindicated as far as I'm concerned.
It helps when you know you're right. And so, yes, indeed, and it gets better than that. Planet 9, it's all started in January, latter part of January, with Planet 9. Oh, out there past Orion, there's some sort of a tug thing. Well, guess where the aphelion of Planet 9 is? Right at the lower part of Orion's bow. If you look at the path diagram, which, by the way, is on that Talking Points page, go link to it, folks, that's exactly where the Zetas said that in 1983, the infrared team found an object out there, and they said, oh, we don't know if it's inbound or not, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, identical, right? So that's how accurate the Zetas are. They put the path up where people should look, and we did. We had teams going out, 2001, 2, 3, and they found it, on the, they took the star charts, they did CCD images, they did infrared, they went to observatories, and they tracked it according to the Zeta's coordinates. This was, in 2001 to 2003, and then in the spring of 2003. It was close enough that people took photos of it coming inbound, crossed the Earth's orbit, and went closer to the sun, preparing to pass the sun, and at that point got lost in the glare, and things changed, became more difficult to see. People saw brilliant double sunrises and double sunsets on occasion. If they used filters that filtered only for red spectrum light, they could see the complex, but, it was tricky. You have to take the insert from a floppy disk, and they sometimes saw the moon swirls, which are like long tubes. This passing planet, Nibiru, is about 4 times larger than Earth, 23 times as massive, and it has multiple moons, at least 2 dozen, that trail behind it, and they form long tubes because they get in a dance with each other, and then the sunlight ricochets down that tube and comes out like a flashlight pointing toward Earth. On occasion, people say, oh, bright orbs, around the sun, and even so bright they would pull over on the highway and try to take pictures. But other than that, it was hard to see because it's so shrouded in red dust.
Right.
Now we have the multi-pronged approach. The first thing that happened is Planet 9. And then in it's coming, and there was... Now, characteristic of this whole year is various astronomers are popping up with stuff. They act like bumbling idiots. Oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Why couldn't we see it before? Well, the Hubble, the WISE, and star chart mapping, except Kepler probes, they're looking way far out, and it was right under our feet.
It's right there.
Then they switched to the Dark Energy Survey, which is infrared, run out of Chile by the ESO, and they see things close in. In 2010, they found several exoplanets closer to the solar system than these other far-out, guys like WISE. Oh, okay, that explains it. Then we had the retrograde issue, because if you look at the Zeta Talk chart issued in 1997, the Nibiru goes into a retrograde orbit as it gets closer in, and they said, well, Now we have Niku. Oh, guess what? There's this little rock thing, trans-Neptune, and it's in a retrograde orbit, and it's in the inner solar system. Then they have the business about, the Zetas said, way out there is a dead binary sun of our star, our sun, and and that's included because Lund University came up with saying, well, maybe Planet 9 is in this weird orbit because another sun stole it from our solar system. So now we've got the binaries under discussion. It's all coming out. We are poised at this point to say that Nibiru is parked next to the sun, just where the Zeta said it would be, and they're going to find it on the Dark Energy Survey, which they're going over the older charts, saying, wait a minute, there's an exoplanet, 2003, oh, right next to the sun. And we're ready for that, and it could happen today.
Why the shroud of secrecy, Nancy? Why does that continue?
Well, Reagan, according to the Zetas, Reagan in way back when, time of 1981, in 1983 actually, they said, issued some executive orders saying, we've discovered that Nibiru really exists and it's close enough that it's inbound, right? Don't anybody talk about that. People will panic. They'll stop paying their mortgage. They'll move away from the coastline. The houses will be thrown back on the banks. There'll be chaos and rioting and insanity. They can't handle it. We can handle the truth, but they can't, right? So he issued this executive order saying it's hush-hush, and plenty of astronomers lost their lives trying to get the truth out, including Harrington, he was a naval astronomer. He went to New Zealand. He said, I'm going to look for it. I'm going to tell the public, and boop, he was dead. So, and in addition, Reagan wrote an executive order, don't talk about the alien presence. Don't tell people. They can't handle it. We can handle it, but they can't. Well, now there's so many contactees. According to the Zetas, over half of mankind has given the call and is chatting with aliens, and they know the truth. Down deep in their subconscious, they know the truth. So what the aliens have done is, rather than force an admission, they've gone bottom up and talked directly to the people. Now, Obama wanted to tell people in 2012, we went through this, so many assassination attempts, that he wasn't supposed to, he couldn't do an Oval Office thing, he couldn't do an emergency broadcast, they were blocking him right and left. So it didn't work out. And Jade Helm in 2015 was all set up that he could get on and tell the people, Nibiru exists, it's there, we're going to have a passage, okay, this is what might happen, we'll let you know, and he chickened out. We got all the way to September of 2015. Jade Helm ended, and Dunford got disgusted and took over. And we are in a silent military coup. That's my understanding.
Nancy, to the new folks who do not know what Nibiru is, would you tell them what this is?
Yeah, it's a planet that has a very odd orbit. It actually goes